The sun rises over the rolling hills of Galilee, bathing the land in golden light. The early morning mist lingers over the valley, softening the rugged contours of the mountains. Below, a restless crowd gathers, men, women, children, travelers from far and wide, drawn together by whispers of a man whose words defied tradition and whose touch brought miracles. They had come from the bustling streets of Jerusalem, the far-off villages of Judea, and the distant lands across the Jordan. Some walked for days, their feet blistered from the journey. Others arrived in small caravans, carrying the sick, the weary, and the desperate. There were fishermen with calloused hands, merchants who had left their stalls behind, farmers who had abandoned their fields, all seeking something beyond the toil of their daily existence. For months now, Jesus of Nazareth had been moving from town to town, his name spreading like wildfire across the land. He spoke in the synagogues, healed the crippled, and cast out demons with a single command. Wherever he went, the crowds followed, hungry not just for food, but for hope. They had seen him touch the eyes of the blind, and they had opened. They had watched the paralyzed rise and walk. They had heard stories of his power. Water turned to wine, lepers cleansed, the dead brought back to life. But more than that, they had heard his words, words that carried weight, that cut through the emptiness of their lives and filled them with something they could not yet name. And now, on this morning, the crowd swells again. They press in, eyes fixed on the man who stands at the base of the mountain, his face calm, his presence commanding. They expect another miracle, another sign. But Jesus does not move to heal, nor does he speak to cast out spirits. Instead, he turns away. Without a word, he begins to climb. A murmur of confusion spreads among the people. They watch as he ascends the rugged incline, stepping over loose stones, his movements slow, deliberate. Some hesitate. Should they follow? But then his disciples move. Peter, John, James, the closest ones, scramble up the slope behind him, eager, expectant. More begin to follow, pulling their cloaks tighter against the wind, their sandals slipping on the uneven ground. Higher and higher they climb, away from the noise of the villages, away from the chatter of the marketplace. Here on the mountain the air is different. The weight of the world below feels distant. Finally, Jesus reaches a small plateau. He stops, turns, looks out over the sea of faces now gathered below him. His disciples settle nearby, their eyes fixed on him, waiting. The crowd hushes, breathless, sensing that something important, something beyond miracles is about to unfold. Then Jesus sits. A rabbi only sat when delivering something of utmost significance. The people fall into an expectant silence. The wind rustles through the tall grass. In the distance, the waves of the Sea of Galilee shimmer under the morning light. A psalm learned in childhood echoes in the minds of the devout. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? The anticipation thickens, every ear strains forward, every heart beats faster. And then Jesus speaks. Heaven. The words hang in the air, unexpected, profound. A hush settles over the crowd, as if the wind itself has stilled to listen. Blessed, the poor in spirit. The people glance at one another, puzzled. This is not what they had expected. In their world, blessings were tied to wealth, to health, to status. To be blessed was to have favor, to be prosperous, to be powerful. The rich were the ones seen as chosen by God, their abundance a sign of divine approval. The poor, they were forgotten, cursed, abandoned. But Jesus does not speak of material poverty. He's not talking about coins or land or the things men strive to collect. He speaks of something deeper, a poverty of spirit. Those who are poor in spirit are not simply those who lack wealth, but those who understand their need for God. Those who come before him not with full hands, but with empty ones. Those who do not boast of their own righteousness, but recognize their own shortcomings. In the crowd, a tax collector shifts uncomfortably. He has spent his life accumulating wealth. Yet in the presence of this man, he suddenly feels bankrupt in a way he cannot explain. Nearby, a Pharisee furrows his brow. He has memorized the scriptures, followed the law to the letter, and yet as Jesus speaks, he feels exposed, like a man who has built his house on sand. Jesus' words are not for the self-sufficient, the proud, the ones who believe they have it all together. They are for the broken, the weary, the ones who know that without God, they are nothing. The kingdom of heaven does not belong to the powerful, the elite, the ones who trust in their own strength. It belongs to those who come before God with humility, who acknowledge their need for Him. A mother in the crowd clutches her child tighter, her heart pounding. She has spent her days struggling to survive, believing that her suffering meant she had been forgotten. But now she dares to hope. Could it be that God sees her, that she in her weakness is the one truly blessed? Jesus looks out at the sea of faces, reading their thoughts before they even speak. He knows the weight they carry, the silent doubts they dare not voice. And so he continues, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Mourning, sorrow, grief. The words strike deep. Many in the crowd have known loss. They have buried children, seen friends taken by sickness, watched as Roman soldiers dragged loved ones away in chains. They know the kind of mourning that comes with death, with suffering, with injustice. But Jesus speaks of a mourning even greater than that, the mourning of the soul. The deep sorrow that comes from recognizing the brokenness of the world, from seeing sin for what it truly is. This kind of mourning is not hopeless despair. It is the sorrow of a heart that longs for righteousness, that aches for the world to be set right. And to those who feel this weight, who weep not just for themselves but for the condition of humanity, Jesus offers a promise. They shall be comforted, not with empty words, not with fleeting distractions, but with something real, something eternal. The people hang on his every word. His voice is not loud, yet it carries, reaching the deepest parts of their hearts. The kingdom he speaks of is not like the kingdoms of men. It does not rise with armies or fall with rulers. It is a kingdom of the humble, the grieving, the ones the world overlooks. And here, on this mountainside, it is being unveiled before their very eyes. Meek, for they shall inherit the earth. A stir ripples through the crowd. Meekness, inherit the earth. This is not how the world works. The Roman Empire does not reward the meek. The soldiers who patrol the streets do not bow to the gentle. The rulers in their palaces do not hand over land to the humble. Power belongs to the strong, to those who take it by force, to those who are unafraid to crush their enemies. And yet Jesus says otherwise. He is not speaking of weakness, as some might assume. The word meek does not mean timid, spineless, or powerless. No, true meekness is strength under control. It is the ability to wield power, yet choosing restraint. It is the patience to endure suffering without retaliation, the wisdom to trust in God's justice rather than seeking vengeance. The people have seen examples of this before, though they may not have recognized it. Moses, the great leader who confronted Pharaoh, who led the Israelites through the wilderness, who stood on Mount Sinai and spoke with God, was described as the meekest man on earth. Yet he was far from weak. He had the power to command, but he submitted himself to God's will. David, the shepherd boy who became a king, refused to strike down Saul, even when he had every right to. He could have taken the throne by force, yet he chose to wait for God's timing. And now, standing before them, is Jesus, the one who heals with a touch but refuses to seek a throne, the one who speaks with authority but does not command an army. His power is undeniable, yet he walks in humility, showing mercy instead of wrath. He is not here to overthrow Rome. He is here to establish a kingdom that cannot be conquered, one where the meek, those who trust in God rather than their own strength, will inherit the earth. Not through battle, not through wealth, but through faith. The crowd listens, some nodding, others struggling to accept this reversal of the world's order. A zealot in the crowd clenches his fists, his mind racing. He had come hoping Jesus would call for revolution. Instead, he speaks of meekness. Could it be that true power does not come through rebellion, but through surrender? Jesus pauses, letting his words sink in. Then he speaks again. Hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Hunger, thirst. These are not abstract ideas to the people gathered here. Many of them have known the gnawing emptiness of an empty stomach, the dry, aching thirst of a parched throat. To hunger and thirst is to be desperate, to be consumed by a need so great that nothing else matters until it is satisfied. And Jesus tells them this is how they must long for righteousness, not as a passing thought, not as a secondary concern, but as a deep, driving hunger that shapes their very existence. Some in the crowd shift uneasily. They have been told that righteousness is about obeying laws, performing rituals, offering sacrifices, but Jesus speaks of something more. This is not a righteousness that comes from outward actions alone, but from the very core of one's being. It is the hunger to see justice prevail, to see wrongs made right. It is the thirst to live in accordance with God's will, to walk in truth even when the world offers easier paths. It is the yearning for a purity that cannot be attained through mere obedience, but must come from a heart transformed by God. A Pharisee stands at the edge of the crowd, his robes pristine, his hands folded. He has spent his life pursuing righteousness, memorizing the law, following every command. But deep down, he knows that something is missing. He has done everything right, yet still feels unsatisfied. A woman in the back clutches the edge of her shawl, her eyes glistening. She has been told all her life that she is unworthy, that her past sins have stained her beyond redemption. And yet Jesus says that those who hunger for righteousness will be filled, not rejected, not turned away, but satisfied. This is a promise. The longing for righteousness will not go unanswered. Those who truly seek it will find it, not through their own efforts, but through the grace of God. Jesus looks over the crowd, his eyes filled with both compassion and urgency. The kingdom he speaks of is not for the complacent, the self-satisfied, or those who believe they have already attained perfection. It is for the hungry, the thirsty, those who ache for something more, something real, something eternal. And to them he gives his assurance, they will not be left empty, they will be filled. For they shall receive mercy. A hush falls over the crowd. Mercy? Some glance at each other, uncertain. Mercy is not a common virtue in their world. The Romans do not value it. The tax collectors do not practice it. Even the Pharisees, the religious elite, often demand justice over compassion. To show mercy is to appear weak, to risk being taken advantage of. Yet Jesus stands before them declaring that mercy is not just a virtue, but a path to blessing. To be merciful is to look beyond the offense, to extend kindness even when it is undeserved. It is the father who forgives a wayward son, the lender who releases a debtor, the friend who does not hold a grudge. Jesus does not speak these words lightly. He has shown mercy with every step of his journey. The leper cast out from the city, he touched and healed. The woman caught in adultery, he spared and restored. The tax collectors and sinners, he dined with them, offering not condemnation but grace. But this is not just about giving mercy. It is also about receiving it. The merciful will be shown mercy. It is a truth as old as the scriptures. When Joseph's brothers betrayed him, selling him into slavery, he could have repaid them with vengeance. Instead, he forgave, and in doing so, found restoration with his family. When King David had Saul, his enemy, within his grasp, he spared his life. And when David himself later fell into sin, God extended mercy to him. The measure you give is the measure you will receive. A man in the crowd clenches his jaw. He remembers the Roman soldier who insulted him, the neighbor who cheated him, the relative who wronged him. The desire for revenge is strong, but Jesus' words stir something deeper. Could it be that by holding on to anger, he is also shutting himself off from mercy. A woman who has been shunned for her past mistakes wipes a tear from her cheek. If mercy is given to those who give it, then perhaps, just perhaps, she can hope for it too. Jesus looks out over them all. He knows their wounds, their grudges, their silent battles. And so he gives them a choice. Show mercy, and mercy will be shown to you. The words cut deeper than any sword. Purity. The people know the rituals. They have seen the Pharisees cleanse their hands before every meal, wash their robes, follow the laws of purification down to the smallest detail. Purity is about what you touch, what you eat, where you go. But Jesus speaks of something different. The purity he describes is not about outward actions, but inward reality. A heart that is not divided, not polluted by hidden motives or selfish ambitions. A heart that seeks God above all else. This is a purity no ritual can create. A Pharisee in the crowd stiffens. He has spent his life obeying the law, ensuring that no impurity taints him. But he knows the truth. His heart is not always pure. It harbors pride, judgment, resentment. The outside may be spotless, but inside, shadows remain. Jesus' words are not condemning, they are an invitation. To be pure in heart is not to be perfect, but to be honest before God, to let go of pretense, to strip away the masks, to stand before him as one truly is. And the promise? They shall see God. A gasp ripples through the crowd. To see God is no small thing. Moses himself was only allowed to glimpse his glory from the back. The prophets spoke of visions, but no one had dared to claim they had seen him fully. Yet Jesus offers this vision, not to the high priests, not to the scholars, not to the outwardly righteous, but to those whose hearts are truly turned toward him. A fisherman grips the edges of his tattered cloak. He has no wealth, no education, no status, but perhaps he can have this. A child sitting on his mother's lap looks up at Jesus, wide-eyed and trusting. There is no doubt in his heart, no hidden pride or ambition. He simply listens, unburdened by the weight of adult concerns. And Jesus sees him. Yes, the pure in heart shall see God, not just in the life to come, but even now. In the beauty of creation, in the face of a stranger, in the quiet whisper of truth. Jesus speaks not of rules, but of transformation. A heart made pure is a heart that truly sees. For they shall be called the children of God. The words settle over the crowd like a gentle wind, but beneath them is a power that shakes the very foundation of the world they know. Peacemakers. The people have seen enough conflict to last a lifetime. Rome's banners hang over their cities, a constant reminder of conquest. Their land is ruled by force, their lives dictated by the will of those who do not know their God. Rebellion brews in the hearts of many. The zealots among them whisper of war, of rising up, of taking back what is theirs. And yet, Jesus does not say, "Blessed are the warriors." He does not praise the conquerors, the revolutionaries, or the ones who seek vengeance. Instead, he calls those who make peace the true children of God. A murmur spreads through the crowd. Some shift uncomfortably. To make peace? Does that mean surrender? But Jesus is not speaking of passivity. To be a peacemaker is not to be weak, to be trampled upon, to remain silent in the face of injustice. No, true peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of righteousness. Peacemaking is an active calling. It is stepping into the broken places and binding wounds. It is standing between enemies and offering reconciliation. It is choosing to mend what others would tear apart. It is Joseph embracing the very brothers who betrayed him. It is Moses interceding for the Israelites even after they turned against God. It is David sparing Saul's life when he could have taken it. And now it is Jesus standing before them, calling them to something higher. To follow him is not to take up swords against Rome, but to take up the mission of God, to bring peace where there is strife, to heal what is broken, to love even those who do not deserve it. And for those who do, there is a promise. They shall be called the children of God, not because they bear weapons, not because they demand their rights, but because they reflect the heart of their Father, the one who offers peace even to those who rebel against him. A soldier in the crowd clenches his jaw. He has seen war, has spilled blood, has done what was required of him. He thought he understood power, but now he wonders, could there be a greater strength in making peace than in waging war? A merchant glances at his neighbor, a man he has quarreled with for years. He has held on to resentment, convinced he was in the right. But now he questions, what if he let it go? The words of Jesus are not easy. They are not the way of the world, but they are the way of the kingdom. And those who walk in this way, who seek peace, who bring peace, will be known as the children of God. For righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. A silence falls over the crowd, heavier than before. Persecution. It is not an unfamiliar word to them. They have seen what happens to those who challenge the powerful. The Romans crucify rebels along the roads, leaving their bodies as warnings. The Pharisees cast out those who do not conform. Even among their own people, standing for righteousness often comes at a cost. And yet Jesus calls them blessed. The kingdom he speaks of is not built on comfort. It is not a place where the righteous are always rewarded, where truth is always welcomed, where justice is always upheld. No, this world resists righteousness. Those who hunger for it, who strive for it, who refuse to compromise, will suffer. They will be mocked. They will be cast out. Some will lose everything. Some will lose their lives. But theirs is the kingdom of heaven, not will be, not someday. It already belongs to them. A young man in the crowd swallows hard. He has always tried to live righteously, but it has cost him friendships, business, acceptance. He has often wondered if it was worth it. But now, hearing these words, he feels something stir inside him, a strength he did not know he had. A woman near the back grips her shawl. She has been shunned for refusing to worship false gods, for clinging to the laws of her ancestors. The pain has been great, but now, for the first time, she does not feel alone. Jesus lifts his gaze over them all, his voice unwavering. You are blessed when others revile you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Rejoice? Be glad? It is a strange thing to ask of those who suffer, but Jesus sees beyond this moment. He knows that the pain of this world is temporary, that the injustice of today will not last forever. The kingdom he speaks of is eternal, and in that kingdom the persecuted will stand in glory. The prophets before them, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Elijah, were hated, rejected, hunted down. But now they are remembered not as outcasts, but as the faithful. The people look at Jesus, some with awe, some with fear. They had come for miracles, for healing, for words of comfort. But what they have found is something greater, a call to live for a kingdom that will cost them everything. And yet, for the first time, they see the truth. The kingdom of heaven is not far away. It is not for the future alone. It is here, now, in the hearts of those who will embrace it, even if it means persecution, even if it means loss, for what they will gain is beyond measure. The weight of Jesus' words over the crowd. The people sit in stunned silence, their minds struggling to grasp the full meaning of what they have just heard. He has not promised them wealth. He has not promised them power, security, or an easy life. He has not declared war against Rome or offered them a way to escape their daily struggles. Instead, he has spoken of blessings found in humility, in sorrow, in meekness, in mercy. He has called them to hunger for righteousness, to purify their hearts, to make peace where there is conflict, and to endure suffering for the sake of truth. This is not the message they expected. Some had come hoping he would lead them in revolt against their oppressors. Others sought healing for their ailments, expecting a miracle. Many simply wanted to see the man they had heard so much about. But now they sit before him, confronted not with a promise of ease, but with a challenge that demands everything. A fisherman clenches his hands, rough from years of casting nets. He thought he knew what it meant to work hard, to provide for his family, to live a good life. But this is something different. A tax collector in fine robes shifts uncomfortably. He has spent his life accumulating wealth, climbing the ranks, securing his place in the world. But Jesus speaks of a kingdom that values something entirely different. A kingdom where the poor in spirit, the mourning, the meek, and the persecuted are the ones who will inherit everything. And then Jesus lifts his eyes once more and speaks the final words of his message. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. The people exchange glances. Salt? They understand its value. Salt preserves, it purifies, it enhances. Without it, food spoils. Without it, things decay. And now Jesus tells them that they are the salt of the earth. Not the kings, not the priests, not the Roman rulers or the religious elite. Them, the fishermen, the farmers, the widows, the outcasts. They are the ones meant to preserve what is good in the world. They are the ones called to bring righteousness where there is corruption, to keep the world from falling further into darkness. But if they lose what makes them different, if they conform, if they abandon their calling, if they allow the world to shape them rather than the other way around, then what use do they have? The weight of the statement settles in their hearts. And then Jesus speaks again. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, so that it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. The light of the world. Many of them have spent their lives unseen, forgotten, overlooked. Yet now Jesus calls them to shine, to illuminate the world, to reflect the goodness of God, to be a beacon in a place filled with shadows. This is no small calling. It is not just about what they believe. It is about how they live. Their lives are to be evidence of the kingdom Jesus has spoken of. Their mercy, their righteousness, their peace, their endurance, these will be the light that draws others to God. And this light is not meant to be hidden. It is meant to be set high, to shine so that all may see. A young woman wraps her arms around herself. All her life she has felt small, insignificant. But now she wonders, could she truly be part of something greater? An older man with a lined face exhales slowly. He has lived through wars, seen the rise and fall of rulers. Yet this man, this Jesus, speaks of a kingdom unlike any he has known. A kingdom that does not rise by force, but by love. A kingdom that is already here. Casting long shadows over the mountainside. The wind continues to blow, stirring the grass, but the people do not move. Something has changed. They had come seeking many things, healing, wisdom, miracles, but what they have received is an invitation to something far greater. Jesus has not just spoken of a new way of living. He has unveiled a kingdom that turns everything they know upside down. A kingdom where the humble are exalted, where the mourning are comforted, where the meek inherit the earth, where mercy triumphs over judgment, where purity of heart leads to the very presence of God, where peace is stronger than violence, where suffering for righteousness is not a curse, but a mark of true belonging. And those who walk in this way, who embrace this kingdom, will not be forgotten. They will be salt. They will be light. They will stand as proof that the kingdom of heaven is not just a distant dream, but a reality breaking into the world here and now. Jesus looks out over them all, his gaze steady, knowing that some will follow, and some will turn away. For those who choose this path, life will not be easy. The road ahead will be filled with trials, with loss, with opposition, but it will also be filled with purpose, with peace, with the unshakable certainty that they belong to something eternal. And so, as the people begin to stir, as they slowly rise from where they sit, some whisper to themselves over and over, as if trying to etch the words into their very souls, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Some walk away in silence, their hearts burning with a new understanding. Others remain staring at the place where Jesus stood, as if unwilling to leave this moment behind. And somewhere, deep in their souls, they know nothing will ever be the same again.